Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis and welcome back to another video. So today we are going to be starting part one of possibly 2 or 3 in a mini series where we're going to be doing a DIY project using this Aqueon 6-gallon rimless tank. I picked it up from Petco. You guys have probably seen these before. And we're going to go ahead and turn it into an all-in-one tank here for the office. Now, I am leaning towards freshwater just because it's a lot easier to take care of, a lot less maintenance. Maybe I'll add an ATO. I don't know yet, but either way, in this video, or at least in part one, I'm going to show you guys in Fusion 360 basically everything I created, the entire model, how the overflow works, how the basket works, the baffles, the compartments for the return pump as well as the heater, and then we'll go downstairs and we'll silicone everything together. And in our next video, we'll come back and we'll add our substrate depending on exactly what we're going to do. Yeah, I haven't quite figured it out yet, but we're going to add our substrate, add some water, add the lighting, and kind of see how it turns out. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started and head over to Fusion 360 and I'll show you guys the entire model. All right, so we're here in Fusion 360. As you guys can see, we have a model of the glass aquarium. Now, it's pretty simple, just make the dimensions the exact same or as close as possible as the original aquarium. Now, when it came to test prints, the back compartment here, I only had a test print one time. It was off by like a millimeter or two, and of course I wanted to silicone in right, so I did a second test print and everything worked out just fine. Now, moving over here to the back of the tank, as you guys can see, we have a standard setup for most all-in-one aquariums. We have our overflow section here, which then comes down to a secondary section where you can either keep a heater or biological media, pretty much anything at this point. And then it will, of course, overflow down into the return section and then be pumped back into the tank. Now, with this, I wanted to make a media basket because I'm a big fan of mechanical filtration. If I want to put carbon in here or anything like that, I wanted to put it into something that I could easily remove. So let me go ahead and turn off the glass aquarium real quick. We'll also turn off the little strainer there. Now, when it comes to the media basket, it's basically a really simple concept. We're just going to have it flow down. Of course, the water will flow down through the center, out the bottom. As you guys can see, the bottom here, I added quite a bit of flow just in case I wanted to put like a little bit of sponge down there. I haven't really decided exactly what I'm going to put in there yet, but I wanted to make sure there was plenty of flow. There wasn't going to be too much of a restriction. And of course, I didn't want the media or the sponge to fall at the bottom. So quite a big opening there. And, you know, of course, it's less to print as well. With that, I went ahead and added this little strainer, which will then kind of sit on the inside of the media, which allows you just to simply remove. You put your finger in the hole there, remove it, put some sponge down there, again, any kind of mechanical filtration or chemical filtration that you want, and then just simply remove it as needed. It's just kind of like a little shelf there for the media basket or the overflow basket, whatever you want to call it. And all of this will then slide down into the chamber there, sit into place. Now, I wanted to make it so it was easy to remove, so I went ahead and put a little lip. And of course, to take the weight off the lip, we have a little bit of a rim around the bottom here where the basket itself will sit on, and it works out pretty good. So it does leave a little bit of a gap for water just to kind of get around it if needed. If it overflows and the water needs to go somewhere, of course, you can always dump into this chamber. But for whatever reason, I wanted a little bit of a gap, not only to compensate for some of the printing differences, but I also want to make it easy to remove just in case silicone is kind of in the gap here. Yeah, it should work out just fine. Now, when it comes to the secondary chamber, my plan is I'm going to put a heater in here. It's going to be, I think it's like a 50 watt, something like that. It's automatically set to 78 degrees. I don't have to fiddle with it. It's just kind of sitting there. And of course, our return pump, which is connected to a 3/8 tubing, and then that will go up into there. So let's go and look at the return real quick, and then we'll get downstairs and start siliconing. So when it comes to the return itself, I wanted to make everything, of course, 3D printed. So we have our 3/8 that kind of goes out to a 1/2. Okay, it's going to kind of snap into place, which you guys will see. And then I just made a simple little nozzle. It doesn't rotate or anything like that. It just kind of snaps into place. It is thin enough where it's going to spread the flow out, focus it towards the top of the tank, and should add some good water flow. I'm not planning on adding any kind of pump outside of the return pump to this, but with everything snapping into place, and again, it's quite bit thin in the front here, it's going to allow the water pressure to kind of spray out throughout the tank. So with that, that's pretty much it for the setup. Very simple. Again, it only took one test print for the main baffle area, and everything has kind of been smoothed off to make it easier to silicone. And it's simply just going to silicone to the back of the tank. I'm going to add some here, the bottom, and the sides, and just kind of slide it into place, and maybe put some weight on it a little bit to hold it to make sure it stays flat. But other than that, it should be relatively simple. So with that said, let's go ahead and go downstairs and put this thing together. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here before siliconing the baffle in place is install the return line as well as the nozzle that goes into the display itself. Now, in hindsight, I probably wouldn't have glued the pump connection to the back of the baffle, just because it did become a little bit of an issue when it came to cleaning and doing general maintenance inside the back of the tank. Given that the connection itself is glued, I can't just snap it out, remove the pump, clean it, put it back in place. I actually have to remove the tubing to make that happen. Now, again, I think my idea behind actually gluing in the first place is I didn't want to risk it popping out for whatever reason, even though it was a tight fitting. I didn't want it to pop out, potentially shoot water all over my office desk, getting on my printers, all that kind of stuff. So I figured just gluing it in place would be fine. The additional work when it comes to doing maintenance really isn't that big of a deal, but it is something that I probably wouldn't do again. Now, when it comes to the nozzle that goes on the inside of the tank, I did glue that in place. It does not rotate. It simply just comes down to a smaller end where it actually kind of sprays the water throughout the display. Works out pretty well. And again, I'm not rotating it or anything like that. This is a very basic connection and nozzle return setup. All right, so let's go to move on to the fun part, siliconing this baffle into place. Now, the first thing I always do when it comes to using silicone or anything that has to do with putting glass together is I make sure that the surface is cleaned. My preferred method is just to use rubbing alcohol. You can use soap and water. I've seen people do that. It's just do rubbing alcohol. It's simple. It dries pretty quickly. You don't have to worry about any residue or anything like that, and it's relatively cheap. Now, once that's done and it's completely dried, it's time to move on to adding the silicone to the back of this baffle. Now, one thing I realized when I was test fitting this is that my fat hand couldn't actually get all the way in behind the baffle to get silicone where I needed it to be. So I went ahead and put the silicone in place for the majority of the baffle. That way, when I slid it in there and kind of set it down, most of those areas were already covered. Now, of course, I am going to go through and use my finger and kind of touch up the spots, but I would say 95% of the baffle has silicone on it. It is in place, and I don't really have to worry about it moving. And after filling it up with water and actually seeing it work over the last couple months, there's no issues regardless of some of the spots that I missed during the process. Now, when it comes to the silicone, I just use some basic stuff I picked up at Petco. It's the clear stuff. You could use the black, but they didn't have it there. And I figured clear silicone was already on the front panes of the glass, if that's how you say it, pans, whatever. And I just went with the clear silicone, relatively cheap. Now, one thing that I didn't do is I didn't make the hole big enough, and I'm over here monkey gripping this thing and actually shot a chunk of silicone out the other end. So again, hindsight here, cut the end a little bit bigger. That way when you're squeezing it, you don't do the back pressure and blow out silicone out the other end. So there you go, lesson learned. Now, when it comes to giving the silicone some time to dry, I did allow 24 hours, and during that process, I did add a little bit of printer paper just for weight to make sure the silicone kind of stayed squished down, as well as the baffle stayed and didn't warp or anything like that. And it worked out pretty good. 24 hours later, everything was good to go, and it was time to assemble the tank. Okay, so we have one last thing we have to do to this tank before adding the substrate and the water and all that good stuff, and that is adding this foam pad. This is provided with the tank. If you have a rimless tank, 99.9% of the time, they're going to send you one of these pads. If you don't have one, look into another method of kind of covering the bottom surface of the tank. It definitely does take some of the imperfections out of the stand and allows less chance of any kind of pressure points or anything that might cause the tank to crack. That's why when we have rim tanks, that's what that rim does. It makes sure that the pressure points or the pressure is kind of spread out throughout the entire tank on that rim and not kind of pinching the glass in any way, causing it to break. So if you have one of these pads, make sure you are adding it to your tank. It doesn't look that bad, and you're not even going to see it once there's water in the tank and there's some pressure on it. Okay, now I want to show you guys what the equipment looks like in the back of the tank, since we're probably not going to be able to see it once it's set up in the office. Now, since I made this video, I have made some changes to the equipment. I will put pictures and links and all that kind of stuff for you guys so you can build your own. Now, I did keep the original return pump, the 90 gallons per hour, the mini submersible pump, the same one you guys saw in the video. I still have that going. I have the same heater, which is a 25 watt small submergible heater. It stays at 78 degrees. It's made for 1 to 6 gallons, which is perfect for a 6-gallon tank. And then I did end up adding a UV sterilizer, a 3-watt mini, which I will put a link for you guys in the description, like I said before. And this was just to kind of clear up the tank a little bit, given that it is a planted tank, a little bit of algae bloom here and there. UV sterilizer worked perfectly, and I did put it in that middle chamber. And I'll try to get a video and pictures of it so you guys can actually see it in action. Now, like I said before, I did regret the way that the return pump was installed, given that I did glue the attachment to the back of the baffle. If I didn't do that, I wouldn't have an issue with the install process. Like I said, it's not a huge deal. I have to clean this pump maybe once every 6 months or so, nothing crazy, and it's just going to take an additional 5 or 10 minutes to get it done. But outside of that, the connection worked out fine, the pump worked out good, and the flow is exactly what I need for this size tank. Okay, now that we have the tank completely assembled, let's go ahead and move on to the substrate, driftwood, fish, plants, all that good stuff, and I'll give you guys a 2-month update on what the setup looks like today. Now, when it comes to the substrate for my nano tanks, I like to use the black fluorite sand just because it does allow pretty good contrast, and you can really see the in-depth dimensions of the tank, especially being a smaller tank. Using that black sand really allows everything to pop and stand out pretty well. Now, when I am making my larger planted tanks, you guys have seen in the past, like the 125, I like to use more of a natural type of sand just to get those natural colors. But again, these smaller tanks, the black stuff just kind of just makes the whole setup pop, and you guys will see that here in just a minute. Now, when it comes to kind of this sand in particular, it is extremely dirty. So I go ahead and just kind of rinse it through like 5 or 6 times with RODI water. Nothing too crazy. Just dump off the dirty water, fill it back up, mix it around, let it settle a little bit, and just repeat that process 5 or 6 times. You're not going to get it perfect, and that's where we add our mechanical filtration in the setup itself to kind of pull out those additional particles once it's completely running. Okay, now that the sand is pretty much rinsed out, I am going to add it here while the tank is in the basement, take it upstairs, add the rest of the driftwood and all that kind of stuff. Now, I only do that for mess purposes. I figured if I'm going to spill sand or water, I might as well do it down here. And it's not a lot of weight, so I can carry this tank up and it's not going to be an issue. Now, when it comes to the driftwood, I did have to make a few changes from what you guys see in this video compared to what it is now. I actually lost the rock or the bottom part of my driftwood, so it was no longer sinking the way it should or stayed in place. So I went out and bought some new driftwood, took that rock off and put it on the one that I want, just because I really do like that piece, and I just kind of had a jerry rig it. So you guys will notice there is a little bit different driftwood setup in the current video, but either way, I went ahead and just kind of flattened this sand out. I like to put the majority of the sand on the back wall, kind of sloping forward, giving you that more of that 3-dimensional kind of look. And then adding the driftwood, bringing it upstairs. We're going to be adding some water, which I am just going to be using some simple RODI water, at least for the initial setup, making sure that it's clean. We're not going to get any major algae outbreaks, letting the tank chill for a few days before adding fish and all that good stuff. Okay, now that we're in the office and the tank is where I think I want it to be, I do want to mention real quick that I had the idea, if you guys want to see it, I will make another one of these and have it strictly be a NEM tank only. And I'll set it right next to this one since I have a little bit more room on my desk. And I figured we can do the contrast between salt and freshwater. Now, just a heads up, it will be NEM only. I might add a couple clownfish, but there won't be any kind of filtration outside of mechanical filtration. And again, it'll just be a NEM tank with probably 1 or 2 clownfish. If you want to see that video, I will make another one of these DIY tanks, and I will set that up for you guys if you want. So just let me know in the comment section. Now, when it comes to filling this up, I am just using a standard MaxiJet pump and a 5-gallon bucket of RODI water, trying to fill it up, not make a huge mess. You can see the sand is still relatively cloudy. That will go away in a couple days with the mechanical filtration, and I want to give this tank a few days to set up. I did end up giving it about 5 or 6 before I went ahead and added plants. Now, In the next clip, you're going to see that the driftwood is totally different than what you have here, or what we have here, because this ends up floating once I get enough water in it. And I went ahead and purchased more. Didn't like that driftwood, so I took the stone off, like I said, and used it on this one, and it turned out pretty good. Now, when it comes to plants, I am going to show you the species. Hopefully you guys can see it. I don't remember exactly everything I got. My whole goal when it comes to plants is I always like to find something very small to go in the front that will kind of carpet it out, and then I add just kind of easy, fast growing plants for the back, not only for nutrient control, because I am going to put quite a few fish in this, as well as many shrimp, and I'm still adding shrimp as I'm making this video now. And I want to make sure that the plants are growing really quickly. The light is not strong. This is just a standard Aqueon light, but it does grow plants. It's nothing like a Kessel or anything like that, but again, it does grow plants. And I want to make sure that I can grow easy plants fast, so they will uptake the nutrients and the tank will stay stable and clean. Okay, so let's go ahead and fast forward a couple months. As you guys can see, the tank is growing in pretty well. Now, I haven't had any plant death, and I am getting in there and trimming them about once every 2 weeks or so, just kind of getting it out of the way, allowing some light to reach the bottom of the tank. And yeah, everything is growing pretty well. The only issue that kind of came with the plants is I must have had some eggs of the bladder snails. As you can see, they are in the display. I am removing them manually. I did add some assassin snails, which are doing a pretty good job of keeping the larger ones at bay. But outside of just manual removal and keeping them kind of crushed against the glass as I see them come up, they are kind of annoying, but they do technically clean the tank, so I'm not completely upset. So it is what it is. It's not a huge deal. It is a little bit of an eyesore, but on the grand scheme of pests and things that you could get in a tank, I'm okay with just the bladder snails. And again, I probably will add a couple more assassin snails to keep them at bay. And yeah, as for stocking, I did add a total of 10 of those ember tetras. Unfortunately, 2 of them did die. Now, for the Tetra police out there, I might be a little overstocked for the 6-gallon tank. Technically, I should only have like 3 or 4 of them in here. But given the current bioload, how much I feed, the amount of plants, and how much they are actually removing nutrients from the tank, I'm not having any algae issues. And they seem pretty happy. There's plenty of hiding places, and everybody seems to be chilling out pretty good. I'm not really worried about the tank being overstocked. On top of that, I did add a pack of 15 Skittle shrimp. And I did pick up a few red cherry shrimp from the local fish store. So far, I've lost a couple of those, but most of them are pregnant or have eggs or something going on with them. So hopefully we'll have some more baby shrimp showing up in the future. If not, I will buy another pack of 10 or 15 because they are pretty colorful, and put them in there. And yeah, they look pretty good. So outside of that, stocking wise, I don't plan on adding anything else. The amount of tetras I have is good. A couple assassin snails, maybe 1 or 2 more. And the shrimp, hopefully they will reproduce and they'll just kind of keep going throughout the tank. Everything looks good. As for water changes, I do a 50% to 75% water change once every 2 weeks. And I am using RODI water with my setup. Now I am topping off with RODI water and my drinking water. Is basically an RO system without the DI. It filters out most of the particles because I don't want to do just straight RODI without supplementation to make up for the lack of kind of elements in the water. So I do like to mix it up every once in a while. On top of that, I am dosing 1 milliliter of Flourish once a week. And again, coloration's good. There's not a ton of light over this tank, so I am pretty surprised on how well the plants are growing, given how much is there. Now, I would prefer that the plants at the bottom would grow a little bit more, but again, we're just out. There's just not a lot of light, and there is other plants competing for that light at the same time. So overall, really happy with the tank. I'm going to keep it going, keep it running, and we'll see if we get some baby shrimp in the process. And like I mentioned before, if you guys want to see an anemone version of this, exact same tank, obviously a different light. If you guys want to see an anemone / clownfish version of this DIY 3D printed tank, let me know. I will set it up right next to this one, and we'll kind of do the difference between the both. So anyways, that's it for the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. This is just one of those side projects that I've done, and it unfortunately took a couple months to get the before and after to get this out here for you. But either way, I'm really happy with the setup, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Now, you're probably going to ask, am I selling these kits? Well, I do have the kit for the 6-gallon, so I can sell you the 6-gallon. At the end of the day, is it going to be worth what you'll pay for the 3D printing and doing it yourself? I don't know. I ended up getting the tank for 50% off. Granted, I did the 3D printing myself and all the designing, so I saved a lot of money. A lot of the equipment that I added was relatively cheap, so I'm probably in this about $100, maybe a little bit more, so nothing too crazy. And I don't have a price point on how much the baffle is going to cost 3D printed wise. But if you are interested in it for the 6 gallon, let me know and we'll work something out. And all right, so that's about it, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you later. Peace.